Mr. Curtis?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Well, we are off to a great start. How great it is to talk to you again. Do you recall speaking with me a few years ago?
I do. It was extremely agreeable. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Right.
I was incredibly intimidated by you just because of your stature and your intelligence, and I felt unworthy, as Wayne's World might have done. We're not worthy. I want to get into the new documentary. You don't like to call it a documentary, right? I should get my...
No, it's a documentary.
Okay.
It's okay.
I want to get into this with you, but first, the hell's going on in England? Overall, like, give me the two-minute spiel from your perspective,
Okay,
of course.
I tell you what being in England is like at the moment. You know, in those computer games where you leave a room and you fight your way around something, and then you suddenly find your way back to the same room that you were 2 days ago. That's what it's like in politics here. Our Prime Minister has just resigned, yes?
Yeah, I saw that's big breaking news, and Olivia should have gotten to this. Liz Truss, after being in power
she's the shortest.
Yeah,
she's
44
the shortest
days?
Prime Minister ever in history, 44 days. I mean, I'm sure they'll find someone shorter somewhere in the world, but I think it's the shortest in our country ever.
She's also the shortest. She's also the shortest prime minister in British history, I believe.
In terms of height.
Yeah,
it's extraordinary. And what all the newspapers are now leading with is the idea that actually the man she replaced, who fell from grace because he allegedly lied to Parliament and everyone else, is now about to come back as Prime Minister.
Oh my God! Whoa! And this is all without the general consensus of the population, right?
Yeah, I think we've had 4 or 5 prime ministers in the last 6 years. I think it's something like that, and none of them have ever actually been voted on by the electorate. So,
can you explain? I mean, because we have a largely American audience. How does something like that happen? What is the system? What is the system in place that allows that to happen?
The ruthless party that can control. We have a system whereby we elect a party, the party elects the leader.
Right.
You don't have that. And that's the basic system. The other system is that I have a theory that politics here has become what you could best describe as cosplay. And actually, what all of us, the electorate, the politicians, the journalists, all know that somehow power's moved somewhere else. We're not sure where it is, but we know that these people don't have the power. So what we do is cosplay instead.
It's kabuki theater.
What happened? Yes. And what's made it worse in this country is that, you remember that our Queen died quite recently.
Wait, what?
The Queen died?
We didn't get that news over here. No, I'm just kidding.
You remember when Diana died, Princess Diana died, there was a great wave of emotion which sort of went out of control. The royal family decided this time that it was going to control it. So for every day of 10 days before the funeral, they kept on coming up with photo ops, new bits of PR in order to control the emotion. And I think the emotion was really, really, really suppressed. Then the Queen was buried and the emotion went away, but it didn't. It went underground and it's now burst out in the heart of politics. And really, it's sort of hysteria time. And it's there's a sort of psycho witch hunt going on for anyone who puts themselves up into a position of authority. It's very, very peculiar.
How is this affecting, like, your average Brit? Like, what is going on in their lives right now is it economic primarily?
Yeah, well, it's affected them in 2 ways. One, they're completely scared because the price of everything, which I think is sort of true in America as well, but not so much. The price of everything, including fuel, heating, is just soaring. The idea that actually the government might look after you seems not to be happening. And people are scared. On the other hand, they're also extremely entertained by it because it is. So you have this strange cocktail of fear about the future, a feeling of bewilderment and being alone in the face of these great big dark forces of history roaring around you and no one in charge, which is terrifying. But yet at the same time, it's just weird.
Well, it's like our Trump years, which are still happening, but there's this you know, it's incredibly frightening, but also very entertaining because the guy's such
there's a
Yeah.
quality of things are happening and there's something new to talk about every
Yeah.
day.
By the way, Adam Conover is here. That's the other voice you're hearing in case you feel like you're losing it.
Nice to meet you, Adam.
Nice to meet you too.
Um,
But I mean, you had the same thing in the Trump years. Yeah. The fascinating thing about the Trump years, which is sort of true about Brexit here, is that although there was constant daily hysteria, actually, if you analyze Trump, he didn't really do much apart from reducing taxes for very rich people.
right.
He didn't build a wall, as far as I know, did he?
Right. He got some stuff. Adam
He built
might know
a
more
bunch
than
of
me.
it. A bunch of it was built. It's just sort of hanging out there in the desert. Biden's completing some of it. Some of it was canceled. There's a bunch of concrete and rebar out in the desert where there wasn't before, but there is not a continuous wall stretching from one side of Mexico to the other.
Let's go. Who's next?
Cosplay.
I just gave my first warning to Vic.
Sorry.
You can't resist.
I couldn't resist.
Just close your
It's too
laptop.
perfect. Okay.
You know, the reason I say that is because the guys over here make sound effects, and it gets confusing for the listener on the other end, being you, Adam. All right. Well, that's it. It's somebody was telling me, my friend was over there, and the what's going on with the railways is so
There's a strike
fucked
every
up.
2 weeks.
Yeah, but in
But this is-
general, like the idea that the rail lines are being privatized and the prices are going crazy, and so people are, if you don't reserve your ticket in advance ahead, if you don't reserve your ticket, how do I say this, early enough, you can't, the prices keep going up, and then they cancel trains.
And actually, you can't travel. No, you can't travel. I mean, there is a company, I think it's called Avanti, which runs one of the lines that goes to Manchester and Glasgow from London, that actually literally has cut half the amount of trains. Quite why, we don't know. No one, you see, what's weird about this is no one knows. We've sort of entered this weird world where no journalist seems to know why anything is happening. No politician seems to have any ability to actually do anything about, say, Avanti. So it just happens. The rail unions go on strike quite reasonably because their jobs are being cut, and no one's explaining why. Yet the government seems to pay no attention to it, and the people just sit there mutely wondering what the hell is going on. It's just very odd. And I think it's almost like well, if we strike, who's the person who's actually going to take notice of us,
Right.
and actually help us? Because the government seems to do nothing.
You need an uprising. You need a populist movement that's going to make it almost impossible for regular business to happen. But that's probably not going to happen either.
I saw it today.
No, we had that. We had that. That was called Brexit.
Right.
And we tried that one. And the government you've now got, the government that fell today was the ultimate result of Brexit and promised that it was going to bring in a new kind of, a new world. It's fallen. They've now gone back to the previous policies that actually gave you Brexit in the first place. So it's weird. It's
a mess.
loopy.
All right. Well, let's move to TraumaZone, which I was so grateful to get an early link to. And
You got it, yeah?
yeah, I watched. I mean, when your stuff comes out, man, I'm sure I've said this before, and I'm a big prophet of yours. That's not the right way. A disciple? No, that's not even it. Proponent.
Oh.
I push your stuff. It is I will say it's very difficult to watch your stuff in America, especially new stuff, because it's behind the BBC paywall.
Yes.
But there are ways. Let me just say that. I hope you don't mind me saying that. There are ways to see your stuff.
I've noticed that pretty soon after anything goes onto the BBC iPlayer, it tends to turn up on YouTube. I have no idea how.
And you don't particularly care, do you?
Well, personally, I think that's fine because I work for the BBC, which is a public organisation. The public have paid for the footage. It's not exactly full of famous people who want to benefit from it.
Right.
So I think the people should have it. Whether the BBC themselves agree with that, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I watched the whole thing, and it's just so people understand. It's called TraumaZone. It's a history of the Soviet Union, or Russia, I should say, from the mid 80s to 99, and it's all as you do. It's your style, your format. It's entirely consisting of news footage and home videos, other documentaries, I assume. It feels like there's some other documentaries that you're kind of taking from.
Yeah.
All with your beautiful music score. And curiously, and this is kind of a more of a filmmaking question than a political or, content of the documentary question, but no classic Curtis VO.
No.
What was that decision about?
There were two reasons. Well, there were two reasons. One, the reason I made the film in the series in the first place is I got my hands on, I think it must be over 10,000 hours of unedited raw footage that was shot by BBC crews all across Russia, well, what was then the Soviet Union and then became Russia, from about 1985 to the present day. And it's an extraordinary record of the collapse, implosion, cataclysm, whatever you want to call it, that happened to the Russian people, both with the fall of communism and then, 8 years later, complete collapse of all trust in democracy, which is what they'd been promised. And I just thought, the reason I made it is I thought, look, I don't think people in the West, and that includes America as well as Britain, really understand what the Russian people went through. Yeah. They know communism collapsed and then it all got full of gangsters and then President Yeltsin got drunk and then you got Putin.
Yeah.
They know that, but they don't actually know the sort of strange, the effect that had on the Russian people. And I just wanted to show that in detail because I think it sort of explains where this is what Putin came out of. It isn't, I mean, there are other reasons, but it is the sort of strange. He didn't come out of nowhere. He came out of total disillusion, bewilderment, and anger at the fact that they not only had the collapse of one giant ideology in 1991, communism, but then 9 years later, the other big ideology of the 20th century, democracy, also collapsed. By 1999, as a guy at the end of the series says in a TV studio, if you call someone a Democrat, you're cursing them. A democracy is a curse now in Russia, he says. So that was the reason I made it. Because the material was so good, I decided not to use my voice. It just was so good.
Yeah.
Why would I want to see me talking over it? But there is another reason behind it. And
you had laryngitis that week.
No, I've got this funny instinct that people are a bit fed up with what is called in social media the hot take. You know the hot take?
Yeah.
Which has rose up really since Brexit and Trump here to its present peak. And I'm one of the worst offenders in my films. I'm provocative and say things. I've just got this funny instinct that we're past peak hot take. And actually what people really want at the moment is just a bit of data about the world. They don't want opinions, because to go back to what we were talking about Trump and cosplay politics, it's also, I think we're living through a bit of cosplay journalism at the moment in this country and in your country, is everyone takes positions, everyone shouts at each other, everyone has the hot take, but actually nothing changes.
Right.
And that's what's really astonishing with the politics here, is we have just had an extreme melodrama over the last 10 days here. And yet we've actually just gone back to where we were. It's as if it just clicks back like that.
Yeah,
and I think that maybe, go on.
No, I would say your voiceover, your narration in your films guide the viewer into a certain way of thinking about the subject. And that's been great, but you wanted to take pull back from that and just lay the footage out with there is titling that kind of helps tell the story, because you couldn't do it with just the images. Yeah. But it was striking to me at first, because part of why I love your films actually is the narration. But then it does settle in, and you're like, okay, this is how it should be.
Yeah, I wanted you to go into the footage was so good, and so detailed that I just wanted to. I had enough material to actually create for 7 hours a world. I mean, obviously it's not the Soviet Union and it's not Russia, but it's near as enough as you can get in 2 dimensions on the screen. And I just wanted to create the world that you went into and experienced roughly. I mean, I'm not naive. I'm obviously editorializing it in the way I put it together, but I wanted you just to experience what it must have felt like to go through that cataclysm, because I really don't think we understood that. And that's one of the reasons why we sort of have simplified the Russians, not just over the invasion of Ukraine, but even like the hysteria over Putin and Trump in your country. We simplified it too much.
Right.
And I just think it's wrong. We need to understand what those people went through.
Well,
I don't mean that in a patronizing way, and I don't mean to say, oh, they're just like us, because they're not.
Right.
They've had their own experience. We need to know. That's all.
It was the first thing, the experience that I picked up on, and this is trivial maybe, but is how fucking cold it is there. The fucking footage of these poor women walking through 3 feet of snow to the village with sacks of potatoes. And the whole film is like, you have like 1 day of nice weather in 7 hours of that movie. It looks hard. I mean, it's a hard place to live.
There was a point at which my boss, a woman called Rose Garnett, who was, came and looked at the films as I edited them, just turned around to me and said, "Look, could you put some sunny days in, just please?"
Adam Connery, did you have a question? I know you were looking at me.
Oh, I was just going to say, I have to see this. This sounds fantastic. Because I'm always fascinated about the specificity of what it's like to live in a particular place. And I always want to know when I'm learning about another country or place, what it is like to be a person there and to go through it. I've been really fanatically reading about China for the past couple years and how, people in America and Europe misunderstand that place because, when you understand what the people of China went through over the 100 years before
the Cultural Revolution
and all of that, just immense turmoil and civil war and devastation and death and famine and all these things. And then once you understand that, you start to understand their relationship to their government a little bit better. And so to hear the same thing about Russia, I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I like to learn about.
You need to BitTorrent it as soon as possible.
I need to torrent some bits of this.
That's exactly right about China. I remember talking to people who now advise Xi Jinping, and they make the point that, look, back in the 1920s, that empire was just torn apart by warlords. It was so big, it sort of imploded in the 20s and 30s. And that's what we are terrified of might happen if we let communism fail. And they also, and it's interesting you mentioned China, because they say, look what happened in Russia.
Yes,
we're not going to have that here. We're just not going to do it. And again, we don't understand. That's what's driving, however weird Xi Jinping is in his attempt to control everything, he is driven by a fear of we don't want what they had in Russia in the 90s. And you're right. We have an idea that somehow we know everything about the world. And the more you look at the way we look at Russia and at China, the more you realize we don't. We have a sort of strange, almost cartoon-like vision of the country.
Yeah, the whole flat Earth, golden arches, propagation of Western culture and values across the globe is failing us like over and over again the past 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So
I just think, go on.
Do you have, I have to wrap it up because Adam is here and we've got all sorts of crap. I could talk to you for hours, you know that. And I'm sure you've got better things to do than this shit show here. You don't need to prognosticate anything here. Like I should bring up that here we are, Russia is in the headlines every single day with the war in Ukraine. What does your film TraumaZone teach us about where we are now and where things are going over there with Putin?
Well, I think, although both in your country with the elections coming up there and with what's just happening in the politics here, it does seem quite dark and frightening. I do have a sort of strange optimism, because if you actually look at what's happening, both in you, do you remember that the whole thing about the future was that we were always told in the West, you must keep doing what you're doing, otherwise terrible things will happen. Like you'll get autocrats like you have in Russia, or you'll get radical Islamism, or you'll become controlled by surveillance technology like in China. If you actually look at what's happening all around the world at the moment, as well as the darkness and sort of strangeness of our societies, radical Islamism is falling apart in Iran. The idea that Putin is going to rule Russia forever like a ruthless autocrat seems to be falling apart.
He's flopping.
To be honest, Xi Jinping is sort of falling apart with vast debt overhang, far bigger than the debt that led to the crash in the West in 2008. All those things that actually we were told would replace democracy if we weren't careful are sort of might not be as strong as we think, which means actually there might be an opportunity for people to actually strike out and think of other new ways of organizing societies. It might be mad, but I think there's a sort of...
No, I mean, that's the beauty of your work, and I think it's best, it best comes out in hyper-normalization, is the critique of the left and, of course, the right, but is that there's nobody out there providing a vision for the future of how these systems aren't working. We can see them failing us all over the place in different ways, but nobody's providing like a true vision of. Maybe Adam Conover is. I'd like to hear his plan, but
don't you find that I know we should shut up a minute, but don't you find that astonishing that actually ever since Trump and ever since Brexit, the left and the liberal left in my country and your country has not actually come up with an imaginative alternative that grabs all those people.
Right.
Do you think there is, Adam Conover? Do you think there's a vision for the future that is, not there? There's. Well,
I think we're starting to see one bubble up, perhaps. I think that here in Los Angeles, we've got like a new group of leaders and a new political movement growing that I think is offering something real to people, but that's very local, and I think that's maybe happening in other cities.
That's a vision for the future where change happens locally, and you can create a more equitable, fair, smaller community that isn't as reliant on the big super systems.
Absolutely. And when I talk to people who are working, from the left especially, they say, well, no, that's what we're going to do. We're going to focus locally, and we're going to build a national movement. And, that's good because you can have tangible results when you do that, and you can devote your life to it and say, I'm actually making things happen. I'm getting people elected. I'm actually changing things. But there's also a way of looking at it where that looks like a retreat, where you say, okay, well, the forces of progressivism and leftism, or socialism, or whatever you want to say, are not able to win nationally, and so they're retreating. The U.S. is becoming balkanized. Our national government can't do anything. So Ron DeSantis gets to run Florida as he sees fit, and people in California try to build something in Los Angeles. There's two different ways of looking at that. But that is where I see the positivity happening, and that's where I devote my own effort, is on the local level.
I mean, you're probably right about that, and that is the way the left is going to redevelop itself. But it still finds it very difficult to actually tackle the central systems of power. Yes. Like here in this country. I mean, I know we're talking about a right-wing government, but it's just been basically brought down by the markets within a week.
Right.
The markets went, no.
The markets decided she has to go.
Yeah. And they might do the same thing if you tried to elect a leftist in the UK. The markets might kick them out in exactly the same manner.
And so what the markets want, and this goes back to the question I was saying right at the beginning, is where is power now? No one quite seems to know. And you are right that the left, it's very good that the left organizes it on local levels, and I wish they'd do it more here. But fundamentally, there's going to come a point when it has to actually provide enough collective power to challenge those forces that have just brought down the right-wing government here. I mean, I find myself very strange supporting a right-wing government here, but it is astonishing that within 5 days the markets just said no, and that was it.
Yeah, that's even creepier.
Yeah.
Mr. Curtis, I'll call you Adam because I've met you.
It's Adam Day.
But it's confusing here with Adam Conover. It's such an honor, always an honor to hear from you. I feel like you're like a guru to me of way of thinking, and I hope to see you in person. I don't want to confirm anything, but I might be over there later next year, so I'm going to look you up.
So that would be great.
Yeah.
We can meet for a drink. That's lovely.
All right, Adam, take care, and everybody check out TraumaZone wherever they can, legally or illegally. Great watching.
All right.
All right, Adam, take care.
Nice to talk to you all.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
you too.
Bye-bye.
China, Russia.
Doug, are you okay?